The scent of polished brass, old money, and quiet desperation was a perfume Arthur P. Winslow knew as intimately as his own heartbeat. It was the smell of the Federal Trust Bank of Boston on a Tuesday afternoon. To the patrons, the harried mothers depositing birthday checks, the old men cashing pension drafts, the small business owners with rolls of sweaty small bills, it was a temple of security, a fortress of order in a chaotic world. To Arthur, it was a complex lock, and he was merely studying the tumblers. He stood at the mahogany counter, a man in his late 50s who looked like he'd been born in the tweed jacket he wore. His posture was that of a retired professor, which had been his cover for the better part of a decade. His fingers, long and surprisingly deft, filled out a deposit slip with a practiced, unhurried grace. But his eyes, the pale blue of a winter sky, were never still. They were cameras, recording everything. He noted the two uniformed guards, their boredom a palpable force. They were big men, former linebackers gone to seed, their holstered pistols looking more like fashion accessories than tools of the trade. Their routine was a slow, ponderous waltz, one heading to the vault anteroom for a sip of water at 2:15, the other making a circuit of the main floor that took exactly 3 minutes and 42 seconds. Arthur's internal clock, calibrated over 30 years of acquisitions, ticked off the seconds with metronomic precision. His gaze drifted past the frosted glass of the manager's office, where the suitably named Mr. Sterling held court, and settled on the heart of the matter, the vault. It wasn't a dramatic circular door from a Hollywood film. It was a rectangular slab of brushed nickel steel, set flush into the marble wall, its surface broken only by a keypad and a single large brass combination wheel. It was austere, unfriendly. It was a McGurney & Sons Model 12, a vintage masterpiece of security engineering. And it was the reason Arthur P. Winslow had been in Boston for 6 months. The deposit slip was finished, a meaningless scrawl of numbers. He slid it across the counter to a teller named Brenda, who gave him a warm, grandmotherly smile. He returned it with a slight, avuncular tilt of his head. Brenda was part of the lock, too. She had a picture of her grandchildren next to her terminal, and a nervous habit of tapping her pen against the counter when the line was long. 3 taps, always 3. "A lovely day, Mr. Albright?" she asked, using his current alias. "Indeed, Brenda. The sun is doing its best to pretend it's July," Arthur replied, his voice a soft, cultured baritone that put people at ease. It was a useful tool, that voice. It could quote Shakespeare or talk a security chief out of checking a trunk. He left the bank, the heavy brass door sighing shut behind him, sealing away the world of quiet money. The Boston air, even in late spring, carried a bite off the harbor. He walked 2 blocks east, then north, his pace unhurried, a man with nowhere in particular to be. He entered a nondescript building on the edge of the North End, climbed 3 flights of stairs, and let himself into an apartment that served as both home and mission control. The main room was Spartan. A single armchair faced a window with a perfect, albeit distant, view of the Federal Trust's main entrance. But the room's true focus was the wall opposite. It was covered in a mosaic of photographs, schematics, and handwritten notes, connected by a web of red and black string that would have baffled anyone but its creator. In the center was a blown-up, grainy photograph of the McGurney & Sons Model 12-vault door. Arthur shrugged off his jacket and hung it neatly on a wooden valet. He walked to the wall, his eyes tracing the lines of his obsession. This wasn't about money. Not really. Not in the way most people understood it. Arthur Winslow had enough money, carefully salted away in anonymous accounts in places with palm trees and flexible banking laws. This was about the lock. The McGurney Model 12 was legendary in certain circles. It had never been cracked. Not truly. There were stories. Of course, a blown torch job in Cleveland in '58, a failed attempt with nitroglycerin in St. Louis, but no one had ever beaten the mechanism on its own terms. It was the unconquered Everest of his profession. And at 58, Arthur felt the pressing weight of his own mortality. This would be his masterpiece, his swan song. A true heist, made in America, not with brute force, but with elegance and intellect. But even a maestro cannot perform a symphony alone. He picked up a burner phone from the desk beneath the wall, its plastic casing cool and anonymous. He dialed a number from memory, a number that hadn't been used in over 5 years. It rang twice before a voice, gravelly and laced with the permanent suspicion of a Brooklyn accent, answered. "Yeah?" "The weather in Boston is unseasonably cool," Arthur said, his voice devoid of its earlier warmth. There was a long pause on the other end, filled only with the faint sound of traffic. Then the voice returned, a hint of curiosity breaking through the gravel. "Is that a fact? And here I am, sweating my balls off in Vegas." "Perhaps you'd enjoy a change of scenery," Arthur suggested. "I'm putting together a reading group, a rather specialized text." Another pause. "How specialized?" "McGurney and Sons, the collected works." A low whistle hissed down the line. "You're not talking about a book club, Arthur. You're talking about a doctoral thesis. That's a hell of a read. I have the first chapter outlined, but I need an expert in practical application." The man in Vegas chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "Practical application? You always did have a fancy way of saying blowing shit up. When?" "A week. The usual place." Arthur didn't wait for an answer. He ended the call, broke the phone in half, and dropped the pieces into a ceramic bowl where he set them alight with a Zippo lighter. The plastic curled and blackened, emitting an acrid smoke. One down. The next call was more delicate. This number belonged to a woman, and it was not stored in any phone's memory, only in the intricate filing system of Arthur's mind. He used a different burner, dialing a sequence that routed the call through several proxies before it connected. The ringtone was foreign, a double burr. "Hello?" a woman's voice answered. "Smooth as silk and cool as champagne." "Mirage," Arthur said, using her old call sign. "The desert is calling. I need a shadow." There was no hesitation. The voice was instantly alert, professional. "Location? Duration? Boston. Indefinite. High visibility target. Requires your particular artistry." Artistry. I like that. He could almost hear the smile in her voice. "I am in Monaco. A tedious affair involving a Russian oligarch and his yacht. I can be bored of him by tomorrow. Specifications? Yeah. Social engineering. Deep cover. You'll be the key in the lock. Intriguing. I'll make arrangements. Contact protocol? The Swan boats. 3 days. Noon." Arthur provided the rest of the details and terminated the call. This phone met the same fiery fate as the first. He stood before his wall of secrets, a conductor assembling his orchestra, the explosives expert, the grifter. Now, he needed the fingers. He needed the ghost. The third call was the shortest of all. It was to a number that, according to all official records, belonged to a disconnected pager in a landfill in New Jersey. But Arthur knew better. He sent a numeric code, 1170419BOS. Then, he waited. He poured 2 fingers of Macallan 25 into a crystal tumbler and sat in his armchair, watching the distant comings and goings at the bank. An hour later, his personal, encrypted satellite phone, a bulky, outdated-looking thing, vibrated once on the desk. A single text message appeared on the screen from an unknown number. "Echo is en route. ETA 48 hours. Arthur allowed himself a small, tight smile. The team was assembling. The heist was in motion. Now, the real work began. 2 days later, in the back room of a noisy, sawdust-covered Irish pub called the Kells, the 4 pillars of Arthur's symphony met for the first time. Arthur arrived first, claiming a corner booth shrouded in shadow, the wood scarred with generations of carved initials. He ordered a club soda with lime and waited. The first to join him was a bull of a man named Salvatore Sal Marino. Sal was in his late 40s, but he looked like he'd been quarried from a particularly stubborn piece of granite. His neck was thick, his hands were like weathered shovels, and his nose had been broken so many times it was a mere suggestion of its original form. He wore a tight-fitting tracksuit that did little to conceal the powerful physique beneath. He slid into the booth opposite Arthur, his eyes doing a quick, professional sweep of the room. "Arthur," Sal grunted by way of greeting. "This place smells like stale Guinness and regret." "It's authentic, Sal, and, more importantly, anonymous." "Yeah, well, my sinuses are gonna need hazard pay." Sal leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial rumble. "So, the McGurney Model 12. You gone senile on me? That thing's a myth. It's the bank vault version of the Loch Ness Monster." "It's very real," Arthur said calmly. "And its weaknesses are as real as its strengths. The only weakness I know about requires enough C4 to level the block. You planning on leaving a crater where downtown Boston used to be?" 'Cause that ain't my style. I'm a surgeon, not a butcher. Your expertise will be required for a different kind of pressure, Arthur assured him. Precision, not power. I'll explain when the others arrive. As if on cue, the pub door opened, letting in a shaft of afternoon light. A woman stepped inside, and the entire atmosphere of the room seemed to shift. She was tall and slender, dressed in a simple but exquisitely tailored cream-colored pantsuit. Her hair was a cascade of dark chestnut, and her face was one of impossible classic beauty: high cheekbones, a strong jaw, and eyes the color of dark honey. She moved with an unhurried grace that drew glances from every man at the bar, yet she seemed utterly oblivious to them. She was a phantom, a vision. She was Isabelle DuPont, though Arthur knew that was merely the name on her current passport. To him, she was mirage. She glided to the booth and slid in beside Arthur, offering a faint, expensive scent of jasmine. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice that same cool, melodic instrument from the phone. Her eyes flicked to Sal. "You must be the demolitionist. I hope you're more subtle than your wardrobe suggests." Sal scowled. "I hope you're more useful than you look. This ain't a fashion show, sister." "Every environment is a stage, Mr. Marino," she replied, unperturbed. "Appearance is the first layer of security, or its absence. I assure you, my usefulness is unparalleled." They waited for 10 more minutes in a tense silence, broken only by the clatter of glasses and the roar of a soccer match on the television above the bar. Arthur began to feel a prickle of anxiety. The fourth member of their team was notoriously unpredictable. Then, without any of them seeing him approach, a figure was simply there, standing at the end of their table. He was a young man, perhaps in his early 20s, painfully thin, with a pale, angular face dominated by a pair of large, nervous eyes that darted around the room like trapped birds. He wore a faded black hoodie and jeans, and he clutched a beat-up laptop bag to his chest like a shield. This was Leo, though his handle in the digital underworld was Echo. "You're late," Arthur said, not unkindly. Leo flinched slightly. The tea was slow, and there were people." He spoke in a soft, rapid mumble, as if trying to get the words out before he lost his nerve. He slid into the booth next to Sal, who eyed him with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. "People?" Sal grumbled. "Yeah, they tend to be in cities. It's a thing." "All right," Arthur said, his voice taking on a new, commanding tone. The pleasant retiree was gone, replaced by the master planner. "We are all here. This is the team. What we are about to discuss does not leave this table. If anyone has reservations, now is the time to walk away. There will be no judgment, only silence." He looked at each of them in turn. Sal gave a curt nod. Isabel offered a serene smile. Leo just stared at the table, his fingers drumming a silent, frantic rhythm on his knees. "Good," Arthur said. He unrolled a large sheet of vellum onto the table, using their glasses as weights. It was a beautifully drafted, hand-drawn schematic of the Federal Trust Bank's interior. The target is the Federal Trust. The objective is the primary vault. It is a McGurney & Sons Model 12, installed in 1948. It has a dual combination mechanism, a time lock, and a pressure-sensitive floor that will trigger an alarm if more than 250 pounds is concentrated on a single square foot for more than 3 seconds. Sal whistled softly. "Pressure floor. Nasty. So no jackhammers, no drills. You can't even stand in one spot for too long." "Correct," Arthur said. The vault is also lined with a copper mesh that acts as a Faraday cage. Any electronic device inside is useless. No radios, no cell signals. It is, by all accounts, impregnable. "Then this is a waste of time," Sal said, starting to rise. "Sit down, Sal," Arthur commanded, and there was an iron in his voice that brooked no argument. Sal slowly settled back into his seat. "It is impregnable to conventional attack. We will not be conventional. We will not touch the vault door. We will not drill, blast, or cut." Isabel leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with interest. "Then how, Arthur? Do we ask the manager nicely?" A genuine smile touched Arthur's lips for the first time. "In a manner of speaking, we will use the bank's greatest strength against it. Its routine, its predictability, its humanity." He tapped a specific point on the schematic. "The vault is open twice each business day, at 9:05 a.m. by the head teller, Brenda McReady, and at 3:30 p.m. by the assistant manager, David Chen, for the afternoon cash transfer. Two people have the combination. Mr. Sterling, the manager, has one half. The other half is held in a sealed envelope in a safety deposit box inside the vault, accessible only by a key held by the head of security, a man named Frank O'Malley. Leo finally looked up, his interest piqued. A split key system, common in high security. But the second half is inside the vault? That's a paradox. Precisely, Arthur said. It's a psychological trick, as much as a security one. It creates a sense of shared responsibility, but it also creates a vulnerability. We don't need to crack the vault. We just need to be inside it when it's open. He laid out the skeleton of his plan. It was audacious. It was intricate. It relied on a series of perfectly timed events, each dependent on the other, a house of cards that would collapse with the slightest misstep. Isabel would embed herself within the bank staff, using her skills of manipulation to become indispensable. Leo would handle the externalities, the city's traffic light system, the bank's internal network, their communications. Sal would be responsible for creating a very specific, non-explosive diversion at a critical moment, and Arthur would be the puppet master, coordinating it all from the shadows. For 2 hours, they pored over the plans, Arthur answering questions, refining details. Sal argued about the physics of his task. Isabel questioned the psychological profiles Arthur had built of the bank staff. Leo remained mostly silent, but when he did speak, it was to point out a flaw in the digital security that even Arthur had missed. By the time they left the pub, slipping out one by one at staggered intervals, the setting sun was casting long shadows through the streets of Boston. They were 4 disparate souls, a con artist, a safecracker, a hacker, and a bomb maker, bound together by the impossible ambition of one man. The heist was no longer a theory on a wall. It was a living, breathing thing, and it had just taken its first tentative step into the world. The following week was a blur of meticulous preparation. Arthur's apartment became a war room. The wall mosaic grew denser, with shift schedules, personal habits, and security protocols added to the architectural plans. Isabelle DuPont, now armed with a flawless backstory as a financial consultant from Geneva seeking a quieter life in Boston, began her assault on the Federal Trust. She didn't apply for a job, that was too direct. Instead, she became a patron. She opened a substantial account, charming Mr. Sterling with her knowledge of international finance and her appreciation for the bank's old-world charm. She asked insightful questions, always with a disarming smile. She brought in pastries from a chic North End bakery for the staff. Within days, she was a welcome fixture. Her target was David Chen, the assistant manager. He was in his 30s, ambitious, intelligent, and Isabel quickly discerned, lonely. She crafted her interactions with him carefully. She asked for his advice on Boston's real estate market. She accidentally ran into him at a coffee shop near the bank, engaging him in a conversation about Japanese literature, a passion she had researched he shared. She was building a bridge of trust, plank by carefully laid plank. Meanwhile, Leo had vanished into the digital ether. From a rented room in Alston, surrounded by the glow of a dozen monitors, he became a ghost in the machine. He mapped the bank's network, not by a direct assault that would trigger alarms, but by 1,000 tiny, invisible probes. He piggybacked on the signal of the bank's weather app. He infiltrated the personal email of the IT manager to find a list of commonly used passwords. He even accessed the city's public works department to study the blueprints of the sewer lines that ran beneath the bank. His task was to create a blind spot, a 3-minute window where the bank's internal cameras would show a perpetual, unchanging loop while the alarms remained active. It was like performing brain surgery with a sledgehammer, requiring a surgeon's touch. Sal was the busiest. Arthur had given him his most challenging assignment, to create a failure. Not an explosion, but a precise, targeted collapse. Sal spent his days in a rented storage locker on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by lengths of copper pipe, bags of ammonium nitrate fertilizer, and blocks of a waxy, putty-like substance that he handled with the reverence of a sculptor. He was building a squib, a low-energy explosive charge that would produce a tremendous amount of smoke and sound but minimal concussive force. His target was not the bank, but the city's infrastructure. The timing had to be perfect. Arthur was the nexus. He coordinated, he refined, he soothed egos and stoked fires where needed. He followed Frank O'Malley, the head of security, learning his routine. O'Malley was a creature of habit, A diner for breakfast at 6:30 a.m., a walk along the harbor at lunch, home to his wife in South Boston by 6 p.m. sharp. He was a former cop, tough and conscientious, but he had a tell. When he was stressed, he would rub the back of his neck with his left hand. Arthur needed to know what stressed Frank O'Malley. The plan was set for a date 3 weeks hence, the Friday before the 4th of July weekend. The bank would be busy with people withdrawing cash for the holiday, providing natural chaos. The city would be distracted, its law enforcement stretched thin. It was the perfect backdrop for their opera. 2 days before the heist, Arthur called a final meeting. This time, it was in the basement of a closed-down butcher shop, a cold, tile-lined room that smelled faintly of bleach and old blood. "Final checks," Arthur said, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "Isabel, David Chen is eating out of my hand," she reported, her breath misting in the cool air. She was no longer the glamorous socialite. She was dressed in dark, practical clothing, her hair pulled back in a severe ponytail. "I have a meeting with him tomorrow to discuss a substantial transfer from my Swiss accounts. I've hinted that it might come with a personal invitation. He will ensure the vault is open at precisely 3:28 p.m. He'll be eager to impress me." "Leo." The young hacker was shivering, but his voice was steady for the first time. "The loop is ready. I've inserted the code into the primary DVR. It will activate on a remote signal from my phone. The blind spot is set for 3 minutes and 15 seconds, starting at 3:29 p.m. The alarm sensors will still ping the central station, but the monitors will show an empty, quiet bank. I've also mapped the patrol routes of the Boston PD's downtown units. Their response time to a silent alarm at the bank is averaged at 4 minutes and 10 seconds. Sal?" Sal patted a heavy, metal toolbox at his feet. "The party favors are ready. One squib, tuned for maximum noise, minimum damage. It'll sound like a cannon went off. Placement is confirmed. The manhole cover on the corner of State and Congress. It's directly over a main comms conduit. The blast will disrupt traffic signals for 6 blocks and give every cop in a half-mile radius a reason to look the other way." Arthur nodded, a sense of grim satisfaction settling over him. It was all coming together. "Then we are a go. Tomorrow, we rest. We prepare mentally. On Friday, we become ghosts." The night before the heist, Arthur didn't sleep. He sat in his armchair, staring at the city lights. He ran through the plan again and again, searching for flaws. It was solid. It was elegant. But he knew better than anyone that no plan survived first contact with the enemy. And the enemy in this case was not just the bank's security, but chance itself. A dropped set of keys, a sudden illness, a change of heart. The variables were infinite. He thought about his team. Sal, the blunt instrument with the soul of an artist. Isabel, the chameleon who could become anyone but herself. Leo, the fragile genius terrified of his own shadow. They were not friends. They were tools, and he was the craftsman. But he felt a strange sense of responsibility for them. He was leading them into the dragon's den. As dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of rose and gold, Arthur P. Winslow felt a profound calm settle over him. The doubt was gone. There was only the plan, the heist, the masterpiece. Friday, June 30th, dawned bright and clear. The city of Boston was putting on its best face for the impending holiday weekend. Tourists already thronged the Freedom Trail, and a sense of festive anticipation filled the air. Inside the Federal Trust Bank, however, the atmosphere was one of focused industry. It was a busy day, the lines were long, and the tellers worked with efficient speed. Arthur was already in position. He was no longer Mr. Albright, the retired professor. Today, he was a city maintenance worker, clad in a grimy blue jumpsuit, his face partially obscured by a cap and sunglasses. He was perched in a bucket truck 2 blocks from the bank, ostensibly repairing a streetlight. From his vantage point, he had a clear view of the bank's entrance and the intersection of State and Congress. In his ear was a nearly invisible comms unit. "Echo status," he murmured into the mic. Leo's voice, tight with anxiety, crackled in his ear. "In position. I'm in the van. All systems green. The loop is primed. Awaiting your mark." "Mirage?" Isabel's voice was calm, almost bored. "In the lobby. David is nervous. He keeps adjusting his tie. He thinks this is a prelude to a romantic dinner. The vault schedule is confirmed. 3:30 p.m. Salvatore? Ready to rock, Sal's gruff voice replied. I'm in the sewer. It smells like shit down here, Arthur. You owe me a lifetime supply of air freshener. Noted. Stand by. Remember the sequence. The clock starts at 3:28. The hours crawled by. Arthur watched the bank, his heart a steady, slow drumbeat. He saw the guards make their rounds. He saw Brenda, the head teller, disappear into the vault at 9:05 a.m., right on schedule. He saw Mr. Sterling emerge from his office to chat with an important-looking client. Everything was normal. At 3:15 p.m., the tension began to ratchet up. The bank was at its peak busyness. The lines were 6 people deep. This was good. Chaos was their ally. Mirage. Move to stage 1, Arthur said. He watched through his binoculars as Isabel approached David Chen's desk. She said something, and David smiled, a little too eagerly. He nodded, glanced at his watch, and stood up. Together, they walked towards the vault anteroom. Perfect. Echo, get ready. Sal, stand by for my signal. At 3:28 p.m., David Chen stood before the massive vault door. Isabel stood slightly behind him, a pleasant, expectant smile on her face. Frank O'Malley, the security chief, was there too, as protocol demanded, holding his key. This was the moment. The two-man rule. Chen began to spin the combination wheel. Left to 42, right to 15, left again to 87. The heavy clicks echoed in the tiled room. Arthur held his breath. This was the first true point of failure. If Chen was nervous, if his hands were sweaty, if he misdialed, but the mechanism accepted the combination. Chen stepped back, and O'Malley stepped forward, inserting his key into a second lock below the wheel. He turned it. There was a deep, satisfying thunk as the internal bolts retracted. The vault is open, Arthur whispered into his mic. Echo now. In the van, Leo's finger stabbed a key on his laptop. On the security monitors in Frank O'Malley's office, the live feed from the cameras froze. It now showed an empty bank lobby, a peaceful scene from 2 minutes ago. The real lobby was still bustling, but no one watching the screens would know. O'Malley pulled the vault door open. The interior was revealed. A cold, gleaming chamber lined with safety deposit boxes on one side and shelves of cash on the other. Sal now, Arthur commanded. Down in the sewer, Sal touched 2 wires together. The effect was instantaneous and terrifying. A massive boom erupted from the intersection of state and Congress. It wasn't an explosion of fire and debris, but of sound and smoke. The manhole cover rattled violently, and a thick white plume of smoke billowed into the air. Car alarms blared. People on the street screamed and ducked for cover. Inside the bank, the sound was muffled but unmistakable. A bomb? A transformer explosion? Panic flashed through the lobby. Frank O'Malley's head snapped up. His training kicked in. His primary duty was the safety of the people in the bank. Everyone stay calm, he yelled, his voice cutting through the noise. He turned to the 2 guards. You secure the doors. No one in or out. You call 911, then get to the street. See what the hell that was. He turned back to David Chen and Isabel. You 2. Get everyone away from the windows and into the back offices. Now. This was the critical pivot. The plan relied on O'Malley leaving his post. The vault was open, but he was standing right there. They needed him to move. For a terrifying second, O'Malley hesitated. His eyes flicked to the open vault. Protocol demanded he secure it, but the sound of screaming from outside decided for him. People were in immediate danger. The vault could wait. Chen! Lock that up as soon as you've moved the clients, he barked, before rushing towards the main doors to manage the chaos. The second O'Malley was gone, Isabel's demeanor changed utterly. The charming socialite vanished, replaced by a creature of pure, focused action. As David Chen, flustered and scared, turned to usher people away, Isabel moved. She reached into her stylish handbag and pulled out a small aerosol canister. As Chen turned back towards her, a look of confusion on his face, she sprayed a fine mist directly into his eyes. It was a fast-acting, non-lethal incapacitant. Chen gasped, his hands flying to his face as a burning sensation blinded him. He stumbled back, coughing. David? What's wrong? Isabel cried out, feigning panic. Help! Someone help him! I think he's having a seizure. This created a new focal point of chaos. People rushed towards the coughing, stumbling Chen. pulling him further away from the vault. In the confusion, no one noticed Isabel take a half-step backwards into the shadow of the open vault door. "I'm in," she whispered into the tiny mic hidden in her necklace. Outside, in the bucket truck, Arthur's heart hammered against his ribs. Phase 1 was complete. Now for Phase 2. He had to get inside. He climbed down from the truck, abandoning his maintenance worker disguise. Underneath the jumpsuit, he wore a perfectly tailored suit, identical to the one Mr. Sterling wore. He also carried a briefcase. He melted into the crowd of people who were gathering to look at the smoke still pouring from the manhole. He moved with purpose, not panic, towards the bank's side entrance, an employee door that Leo had disabled the lock on remotely. He slipped inside. He was now in a back hallway, lined with offices. He could hear the commotion from the lobby. He moved quickly, silently, towards the vault anteroom. He found Isabel standing just inside the vault, her body blocking the view from anyone who might look in. The massive door was open about 2 feet. The air inside was cold and still. "2 minutes, Arthur," she said, her eyes scanning the hallway. Arthur stepped into the vault. The sheer presence of the place was overwhelming. It was the heart of the beast. The wealth surrounding him was staggering, but he ignored the stacks of cash. That was not his objective. His eyes went to the wall of safety deposit boxes. He needed one in particular. Box 117. He found it. A long, narrow box made of brushed steel. This was where the bank kept its most valuable items, and more importantly, the second half of the vault combination. He set his briefcase on a small wooden table in the center of the vault and opened it. Inside, nestled in custom-cut foam, were not tools of theft, but tools of creation. A small, powerful laptop, a high-resolution scanner, and a delicate, articulated arm with a camera on the end. "Leo, I'm at the box," he whispered. "I need you to talk me through this. The pressure floor." Okay. Leo's voice was a frantic whisper in his ear. "The floor is a grid. The sensors are under the tiles. You have to distribute your weight. Stay on the balls of your feet. Move slowly. The table is safe. It's on a reinforced pad." Arthur took a deep breath. This was the most delicate part. He had to get the box out, open it, and copy its contents without triggering the alarm. He reached for the box. It was heavy. He pulled it gently, his muscles straining, keeping his feet moving in tiny, shifting steps to avoid concentrating his weight. He laid the box on the table. Now for the lock. It was a simple key lock. Arthur reached into his pocket and pulled out a leather roll. He unrolled it to reveal a set of lockpicks finer than surgical tools. This was his first love, his original art. He inserted a tension wrench and a pick. His hands, which had seemed so professorial, were now steady as stone. He closed his eyes, feeling the pins through the metal. 1, 2, 3, a gentle click. The box was open. Inside, on a bed of velvet, lay a single sealed envelope. Arthur didn't open it. That would leave evidence. Instead, he used the scanner. He carefully slid the envelope under the glass, making a high-resolution digital copy of both sides. He then used the articulated camera arm to take detailed 3D images of the box's lock mechanism and the envelope's wax seal. They needed to be able to recreate everything perfectly. 60 seconds, Arthur." Isabel's voice was tense. "Almost done," he muttered, his fingers flying across the laptop keyboard, verifying the scans. "Perfect." He closed the box, relocked it with his picks, and, with agonizing slowness, returned it to its slot in the wall. He packed his briefcase, closed it, and took a final look around. The vault was exactly as they had found it. They had taken nothing. They had left no trace. They had only stolen information. "Clear," he said. Isabel gave a sharp nod. She reached into her bag again and pulled out a small glass vial. She dropped it on the floor just outside the vault door, where it shattered, releasing a pungent, ammonia-like smell. Then she started to cough violently, stumbling out of the vault anteroom towards the crowd around David Chin. "The air!" she gasped, clutching her throat. "From the vault! Something's wrong with the air!" This created a fresh wave of panic. People recoiled from the vault area. In the chaos, Arthur slipped out the way he came, merging back into the crowd on the street, just another bewildered businessman. A moment later, Frank O'Malley, having secured the front doors, rushed back towards the vault. He saw the broken vial, smelled the chemical odor, saw Isabel and others coughing. His mind, already reeling from the external explosion, connected the dots. A chemical attack? A diversion? His priority was now a potential hazmat situation. He slammed the vault door shut and spun the wheel, locking it. The incident was over. Outside, 3 blocks away, Arthur climbed into the back of a nondescript white van. Leo was in the driver's seat, his face pale but triumphant. Sal was in the back, already changing out of his filthy clothes. "Well?" Sal asked. Arthur allowed himself a real smile. He held up the laptop. "We have the combination." Phase 1 was a complete success. They had penetrated the impregnable, but the heist was only half over. The real theft was yet to come.